you see them and suddenly more teeth are gone. The color of their pallor, and then it's a wash, and eventually it's gray. I don't know if you've ever seen anybody who's suffered meth addiction. They get this gray skin, and now often just scars everywhere. The things just don't heal. Hair is gone. There's people my age, I swear they're 100, who fall into that. Canada's like that. Not all parts of it. Parts of it are very, very beautiful. But in Vancouver, British Columbia, there's parts of that city where you would swear you're on the set of The Walking Dead, with people who are acting like zombies because of drug addiction. We know about that in Canada. We know that the forced imprisoning, literal. No, I'm not saying spiritual imprisoning. Imprisoning dads who refuse to pretend their daughters are boys. And the so-called judge saying, well, I'll put you in prison until you agree to pretend your daughter's a boy. So you can say she's a boy in your jail cell, and you can come out the moment you agree to pretend. It's godless. Obviously, forcing someone to lie is godless. Giving people the means of their own destruction, handing out fentanyl, which they do. Taxpayers in Canada purchase the fentanyl for people. Godless. But then there's this. What does euthanasia mean? What does that word mean? Now think about your mental picture of what the word euthanasia means, and imagine a slight change to that. Imagine it's no longer what you think of as there. Here's how dictionary.com defines it. The painless killing of a person or animal suffering from an incurable and painful disease or irreversible coma. That's one definition. Did you have a different definition in mind? Was there something that you put in your mind? See, I remember when euthanasia was something that someone made a voluntary request for. Help me die. I remember when that was considered. In fact, if you go back to the olden days, there's 4 examples of this from the UK's National Health Service. They say there's 4 types of euthanasia. Active, voluntary, patient requests and direct action. Passive, voluntary, patient requests, withdrawal of treatment. Non-voluntary, decision made for incapacitated patient, or involuntary, against person's will, usually illegal. Oh, usually illegal. Usually. So again, the active request, I want to die, please help me. That's an active request for euthanasia. Passive, so a patient says, hey, you know what? I want you to do a do not resuscitate order. So people will do this at the end of their lives. Look, if God takes me, just let me go. I don't want you to bring out the paddles and beat on my chest and inject adrenaline into my heart. Just let me go, please. So letting nature take its course. Non-voluntary. Someone's incapacitated and cannot issue their choice. So sometimes this is called brain dead, which looks less and likely to be a thing, by the way. Less and less likely to be a thing. But people are so-called brain dead, therefore they can't issue a choice. So you choose for them. Horrible decision that people have to make. Very hard. And those are all legal. Involuntary is normally illegal. Where are we headed in Canada? In 2016, they introduced the MAID program. They came up with a really friendly sounding name for people who want to have help dying. Medical assistance in dying. You just call a MAID. The MAID will come and clean things up. Very friendly. In 2016, there were 1,118 MAID deaths. 2017, 2,838. The projected amount for 2023, and they're not done counting yet, 15,280. Assisted suicides are now 4.6% of all deaths in Canada. The average age of the so-called MAID recipient is 77 years old. Assisted suicides since 2016, 60,238. But, it's just euthanasia, voluntary or passive. Well, that's interesting because it's no longer that. Sometimes pressure is involved. This is a friend of the show. I've had her on a few times. She's a great Canadian patriot. I'd love to see her come to the Lord, Kate Want. And Kate Want says Trudeau's Canadian medical professionals are now pressuring medically assisted murder.
They seem to be offering now a free MAID, which is medically assisted suicide, to all kinds of people. They're just offering this up, and not just offering, but pressuring people and saying, you are a burden on the healthcare system. It would be better if you die, if you take euthanasia. This is nothing short of eugenics.
I agree. It sure seems like eugenics. I just had last week opportunity to visit with a friend and to minister a bit to a friend. And he's got a son in his early 30s. And his son has just gotten into a really bad season. Lost a job and responded really poorly to that. It was a professional job, something he'd sought for a long time. Lost that job. He made a mistake. And it led to the loss of this, and it's very hard for him. And he's fallen into depression and regressed into drug use and marijuana and now some other things. There's some drugs they're now selling over the counter in gas stations and such that they market like 5-minute energy and people for a 5-hour energy. And people figured out that these things, if you take enough of them, they're hallucinogenic. So they're like taking mushrooms, but quote, legally. So his kid's gotten addicted to this. And so just administering and talking, we came upon some solutions, some things to try, brainstorming, putting God at the center. Now, if we were in Canada, what I could have said, where a Canadian healthcare professional is, maybe you should let me kill him. Maybe he should be a MAID recipient. And I can hear people say, what are you talking about? You said that this young man's in his early 30s. Yeah, but he's super sad. And super hopeless. And he's right now not physically well. He's put on about 30 pounds. So he's actually, by definition, obese now. So it's not going to get better. So I'm just doing an act of kindness. In fact, why don't you let me talk to him? Put him on the phone. Hey, you know what? I could kill you. It's painless. In fact, I could just have a device mailed to you. And it's just like a bed. You just get inside. You can even have your favorite music. And just slowly we'll fill that container with nitrogen instead of oxygen, and you'll die. Painlessly, just fall asleep. That's what they're doing in Canada. So euthanasia is now for people who are healthy, who are young, who have every reason to live. But they're sad. So I want you to hear this. This is Margaret Marcilla, the mother of 26-year-old Keno Vafifian, who Canada euthanized.
That he was always on top of his insulin, and in fact, he showed me his A1Cs a few months ago that they were fine because it was made accessible to him. Because already he was approved once, he just shut it all down. He shut down all help.
Isn't this just abortion of a 26-year-old? So, man, for a second, I was starting to think, well, the United States is so much better. We are. We haven't yet started to do this officially. They're building the edifice for it. They're prepping the environment. In Seattle, you can have your body made in the garden mulch. You know, so your friends can grow tomatoes with you and eat. Remember, kids, the tomatoes tonight came from my grandpa. That's real. At least, though, that young man agreed to it. Not everybody does. This is from the postmillennial.com, also from Canada. They're an actual Canadian publication by source. That's where they came from. An elderly Canadian woman was euthanized by government after her husband got sick of caring for her, according to a report. The review raised concerns about potential coercion, citing the husband's caregiver burnout, limited access to inpatient palliative care, and the fact that the MAID assessments were conducted with the spouse present. So a woman, elderly Canadian woman, had gotten sick, and she was in her 80s. She had some serious complications following coronary bypass surgery. At one point, she'd entered palliative care. She was discharged home. At one point, she said, yeah, I think I'm ready to die. Then she withdrew that. No, I'm getting better. I want to stay alive. Her husband, according to the Post-Millennial, came back and changed these orders. And Miss B was discharged. They called her Miss B, sent home. Request for hospice palliative care placement was denied. So her husband had to take over the care. And soon after, her husband contacted the provincial MAID coordinator seeking an urgent reassessment. A second practitioner deemed Mrs. B eligible for MAID and moved quickly to advance the process despite objections raised by the first assessor, who said, wait, she doesn't want this. According to the piece, this woman did not want to die. And they killed her. Remember at the beginning of the segment, I asked you your mental idea of what euthanasia means? Does it mean murder? Remember, the technocratic medical authorities in this country tell us abortion is just the removal of some random cells. Remember, in this country, they told us we don't have immune systems unless we get shots. Now they're telling us euthanasia is also murder, but it's euthanasia, so it's fine. Pray for Canada. Pray for the United States. We'll come back on the Disciples here.
Over the last 10 years, young people have been deconstructing their faith, or more accurately, de-Christianizing. The First Great Awakening was a supernatural move of God that happened in the American colonies just before the American Revolution. Now we need another Great Awakening today. Please help spread the sparks of revival by supporting AFA with a gift, and we'll send you a free copy of the DVD, Desperate for More, The First Great Awakening. Go to afa.net/revival today. The Hyde Amendment is supposed to protect us taxpayers from subsidizing abortion, but there are loopholes that allow the Affordable Care Act plans to subvert it. That means your plan and millions of other people's plans could include abortion coverage, or at least indirectly support that evil industry. We're giving you an opportunity to join us in calling on Congress to take action to stop it. Visit afa.net/activism today. afa.net/activism. The following is a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt and it stressed me out. But what I thought was a solution turned out to be a problem. I kept hearing ads about debt settlement that seemed too good to be true. And actually, it was. When I called, they told me to stop paying my bills. That didn't sound right to me at all, so I hung up. Later, I found out that debt settlement is bad, real bad. Then I learned that there is a right way to pay off your credit cards. It's called a debt management program from the great team at Trinity. Trinity had a plan. In the end, I paid off my bills, I saved thousands, and I even improved my credit score.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Heather. Please forget debt settlement and remember Trinity Debt Management.
1-800-788-1813.
How do you measure love? What thermometer do you use to measure the heat of it?
This is Focus on the Family Minute, and the late Dr. Robertson McQuilkin explores the true test of love.
You say you can't measure love, but Jesus gives us a way to measure love. Love is proved by the sacrifice that it makes. You may have genuine love without sacrifice, but there's no proof of it, because you might be acting lovingly for all the benefits accruing to me. But sacrifice, when it costs, there's the proof. I've discovered that happy homes are those where each lives for the welfare of the other. So Muriel taught me that love must be expressed and it must be demonstrated. One without the other is not genuine love.
Hear more of this incredible story at FamilyMinute.org.
Welcome back to the Sun with you. We'll get to Tom Babbling, a person note here in just a moment. We'll get to also an email here. I'm desperate to have this guy hear me. So I'm going to try the radio show because I can tell he's getting really frustrated with me. And so I'm trying what I can on the radio show. Senator Mike Lee, and this is clean up, I will get to that email. Senator Mike Lee spoke about the emotional blackmail being used against American citizens.
Each time we bring up this issue or another issue related to it, we tend to hear a very similar set of arguments. The arguments go something like this. Yes, there have been problems in the past. Yes, there have been abuses of FISA 702. But you need not worry because we now have procedures in place, administrative procedures that will fix the problem once and for all. We now have to have even more layers of administrative approval within the agencies charged with administering this framework. And so you need not worry. What you ought to be worried about is another 9/11. What you ought to be worried about is that we are all going to die unless the U.S. government has the ability to collect content of private communications involving U.S. citizens without a warrant. I find this rather troubling because that's not what the Constitution sets up. The founders didn't design a system in which liberty and the protection thereof depends on compliance with manual.
It's a great point. And by the way, what are systems and procedures? What are they? Paper. Words on paper, words on a screen. Crime is illegal. But I can print the papers out for you. Crime is illegal. There's papers and procedures on this. So what happens? Well, there's the human sin problem. Happens. And in DC, one of those sins is lording their power over others. So if and until DC ever has a change of soul state, the abuse will continue. And God has warned us about this from the very beginning. God said, are you sure? Are you really sure you want human kings? Samuel, go to the people and tell them what they're going to do. And Samuel, the prophet, came and said, here's what they're going to do. And the people said, but we want our king to be handsome, super tall. We want a lot of vascularity in his arms and a big, strong chin. Okay. You can have me as king, but you wanted Saul. So here's Saul. And that's smart about that. So we shouldn't be surprised, but nor should we give up. Because praise God for him showing the corruption. I mean, I really believe, and I haven't said this in a while, that God is just tearing down the curtain behind our temple. In the time of Jesus, there was the temple. And when he died, the curtain was torn down. It was God saying, no longer do you need to have the Levitical priest go in on your behalf to talk to me. You can come directly to me through my son. That curtain is unneeded. That temple is now it's in you. The Holy Spirit will reside in you. And I feel like God is saying to us, you guys built a temple and it's going to be Donald John Trump. He's our rescuer. Or it's the people who run Joe Biden. They will rescue us. Or Kamala Harris will rescue us. No, that's a temple. Praise God for showing us the stink of that temple. One email here, then we'll get to Tower Babbling in a person or not. Todd, I'm reaching out on behalf of my friend Jeff Winehouse, a truly selfless man in prison for his stand against tyranny. He asked me to pass this message to you. Todd, I heard you on Monday talking about the Democrats not supporting the free press. I've reached out numerous times to you since you've applied. Obviously, you're not too concerned about the First Amendment. I realize you are pro-cop and support the killing of protesters, which one day you will come to stand before Jesus and get accounted. In the meantime, you're going to reap what you sow. God is not mocked. What you do unto others, God will do unto you. For the first 200 years of this republic, in order for there to be a crime, you had to have a victim. Police were charged with keeping the peace. Today, the police are pirates only concerned about raising revenue and running cover for their evil overseers. Lawyers are large and in charge, and they are the problem. There's nothing new under the sun. Like Luke 11:46-54, I've been locked away from my family for over 4,840 days after an assassination attempt on 9/11/12, which I survived 2 shots to the head and 2 to the chest. My crime, I dared to expose the enemies of our republic, our fine police officers. When charity comes to your door, it will be wearing a uniform. They will be sent by our fine politicians, whose acts are so evil, it is an evil shame even to speak in them. Ephesians 5:12. You're either part of the problem or part of the solution. Whose side are you really on? The Lord uses the good ones, the bad ones uses the Lord. Jeffrey R. Bullet Inman Winehouse. Jeffrey, I have responded to your emails about 10 times, or at least 3. They're not getting through, brother. I don't know your story other than what you've written in these brief correspondences. I'm curious about your story. So I have responded, and I'll respond to your friends. One hint, please. One way to assure you get no response from someone like me is to come along and say something like, I realize you support the killing of protesters. Please don't bear false witness. I do not. What I support is cops being able to carry out their legal duty to make arrests and not have other people intercede to stop that. And if you want an example of what that would look like,